So, in some countries, you have to watch your P's and Q's. But if you're like Mexico, when you take a bath or a shower, you need to watch your H's and C's, because an H on the faucet means helado, which means cold. And a C means caliente, which means hot. So for the unsuspecting, the result can be a little bit surprising. So we need to take care of our expectations. An interesting cartoon shows a 4th grade boy standing toe-to-toe and face-to-face with his teacher. Behind them is a blackboard covered with math problems that the boy has not finished. With rare perception, the boy says to the teacher, "I'm not an underachiever, you're an over-expector." Expectations. When I ask, what are your expectations? Or if I ask, the title of the sermon is, what do you expect? Now, if I say that in just the right intonation, what do you expect? You may think I'm saying, I told you so, but that's not what the sermon is about. That's the wrong inflection for this sermon. It's what do you expect? What are your expectations? Not just in life, not just for your everyday life, but for the church and in relationships. What are your expectations? The emphasis today is about what we expect, what our presuppositions are, and how it affects what we find in our lives. So the setting for our reading today, John the Baptist had been arrested, placed in prison. And he started doubting, and he started wondering, what? Did I do the right thing? Was he really the Messiah? And so he sent his disciples to Jesus and said, "Are you really the one? Is it really?" Now, maybe there was something else going on there. He was trying to turn his disciples over to Jesus since he knew what was going to happen to him. But nevertheless, they came to Jesus. And Jesus had this conversation with them that he was the Messiah. And then he turned to the crowd and he asked, "What did you expect when you went to see him?" Because what they found was someone who was pretty radical, pretty strange. Somebody, if we see somebody preaching on a street corner, as good Presbyterians, we would probably say, "Oh, they're just strange." Well, they're in the spirit of John the Baptist. So imagine how the people in Jesus' day felt about John the Baptist. So he said, John came from God. And so he was talking about John. And that's our setting. That's where we are when Jesus starts this passage. Expectations and presuppositions. Years ago in my hermeneutics class, which is a big word for interpreting the Bible, our teacher said to us, there is no one who comes to the Word of God without presuppositions. When you come to the Word of God to interpret the Word of God, don't kid yourself. You're coming already having a mindset of what it means. And so the key is to recognize your presuppositions so that when you come to it, you can gauge whether you're imposing your ideas on the text or the text is imposing itself on your ideas. And that's part of what we're talking about today. We're working on this transformation grant. And one of the things Susan said is that transformation should scare you, and I'll talk about that a little bit more in a minute. So expectations and presuppositions. Our expectations can be a result of spiritual or emotional memory or immaturity. Jesus said to these people, he said, "You are like children sitting in marketplaces and calling to one another. We played the flute for you, and you didn't dance. We grieved, we mourned, we wailed, but you didn't mourn with us." John the Baptist didn't sing and dance, and Jesus did, and they were both judged. Our lives control what we think. Our past lives unless we deal with it, unless we think them through or recognize. My father was the son of a coal miner, an immigrant coal miner at that. He lived his life in insecurity. I can remember one of the things that he and my mom used to always say, who do they think they are? They think they're better than us. And they repeated that over and over and over again. And as a child growing up, I picked that up, and I picked up that insecurity, and it took several years of therapy to work through all of that. And I still work through it. Because our past and our thoughts and the things we've heard color our expectations of life. If we've grown up in a family that was poor our whole lives, and we didn't have abilities to move forward or get better jobs, our thoughts, our expectations would be that we will never get anywhere. That why bother going to school? Why bother graduating? Because what's it going to do for me? It didn't do anything for my parents. And there are millions of people in our country today, not to mention the world, who are trapped in those thoughts and those burdens of it will never be any different. One of the great reasons why I think Celebrate Recovery would be an amazing program for this community. We think there's really not much we can do. In fact, when I graduated from high school, I was a steelworker's daughter. College? I think so. My brother went for a year and a half and then quit and was paying loans the rest of his life. No, college? Wow. My background colored my expectations. My background colored what I could hope for, what I would wish for, my hopes for the future. And it wasn't until God made changes in my life, and I ended up being the only one in my family that ever graduated from college and went to graduate school. God can change our expectations, but we have to be willing to recognize them and lay them down. Our expectations are formed by our culture, family, and experience, and I said that as well. Any child who has been repeatedly told you're not good enough, you're not pretty enough, you're not smart enough, will do one of two things. They will be an underachiever, they will be just weary, and they will just live life day by day and say, well, whatever. Or they'll rebel against it and overachieve. But even that isn't good because they're doing it for heartbreaking reasons. They're doing it to find that fulfillment that they didn't get as a child. I have a friend who was married multiple times because she could never find that person to give her that assurance that she needed as a child. And she was stuck in that childhood emotionality that she wasn't good enough. Was married multiple times because she could never find that person to give her that assurance that she needed as a child. And she was stuck in that childhood emotionality that she wasn't good enough. And so every time she met someone, no matter how kind he was, no matter how good he was to her, and most of them weren't, she had to find another one, somebody to fill that hole in her heart. So our expectations and presuppositions control the way we go. Now, not everybody has those bad experiences. Some of us have tremendous expectations. We expect everyone to look the way our family looks. We expect everyone to talk the way our family talks and do the things our family does. And that's the very reason Jesus got judged, wasn't it? Jesus drank and ate with tax collectors and sinners. He said, Zacchaeus, come on down. I'm coming to your house today. And everybody went, oh, he's a traitor. He's a tax collector. He's a sinner. And you're going to his house? And what did they say to Jesus when the woman anointed his feet and cried and washed his feet with her tears? If he was really who he says he is, he would know what kind of a woman she is. We are not much different from those people. We look around us and we say, we look at people and we say they're not right with God because they don't dress right, they don't look right, they drink, they smoke. And we take the place of God, judging them and telling them what they should be instead of letting God tell them who they are. Our expectations also color our experiences. And this is very personal to each of us. Now, some of you have probably run into people who are positive confession. Does that sound familiar? You know, what we say is what we'll be. How we talk is what we'll become. And you know, to a point, that's true. Because as my dad and my mom always repeated that to themselves, they think they're better than me. They think they're better than us. They continually supported that thought in their hearts. I'm not good enough. And we do that to God, don't we? We say, God, I'm horrible. I'm terrible. I'm so sorry. I'm a mess up. I'm a failure. I'm always goofing up, God. I'm not good enough for you. Well, you know what? In a way, that's true. We aren't good enough for God. But Jesus was, and he died for us. And so instead of reminding God and ourselves, because God knows who we are, he knows our failures, he knows our faults, but instead of constantly telling us, ourselves and everyone else how miserable we are and how bad we are, maybe we should talk about what God has done and what God is doing in our lives. So, Job said in 325, verse 325, what I feared most has come upon me. He lost everything. He lost his children. He lost his herds. He lost his possessions. He lost his wife's loyalty. He lost his friends because they started attacking him, and he lost his health. And he said, what I feared most has come upon me. A lot of our word teacher friends says, see, if you confess with your mouth bad things, they'll happen. I'm sorry, religion is not sympathetic magic. What I say isn't going to make something happen physically. However, what I say in my mind and in my heart over and over again about myself or other people will make something happen. It will make us angry. It will make us sad. It makes us bitter against other people. I always tell someone when they're mad at someone, another person, have you prayed for them? Well, yeah, I prayed that God would straighten them out. And then, no, that's not what I'm talking about. Have you prayed for God to give them peace? Have you prayed for God to give them hope? Have you prayed for God to help them deal with whatever it is in their heart that's causing them to be so angry or to be so frustrating towards you? Our expectations and the way we choose to think affects our experiences. Expectations also limit our experience. In verses 17 and 18, Jesus said, you judged John, and then I did something different than John, and you judged me. Our expectations limit our relationships with other people. They limit with other people because sometimes we put on them, we expect them to do something wrong. We expect them to offend us. We expect them to be what we think they shouldn't be. And then when they do it, see, I told you so, maybe they say, what do you expect? Or we expect them to do what we want them to do, and when they don't, we get upset. So, what does that bring us to? What is this all about? What's the point of us all today? The point is this, that we have to change our expectations. We have to change our mindset. God is with us. In verses 28 and 29, Jesus talks about coming to me, you who are heavy laden and burdened and weary. Doesn't it just sound like, oh, you've been there. You may be there now. I'm just tired, God. I just can't go forward anymore. It's either I'm sick, or it's finances, or it's family, or it's whatever. How can I go forward? How can I continue this relationship? How can I believe that you actually want to do something for me? A few of the verses that I've included in there tell us that we are to live a transformed life, not just by doing it. I get frustrated with people who say, when you come to Jesus Christ, he takes all that away and you're changed immediately. No. For some people, God will completely set them free from something. Does that happen to everybody? No. No. But for him it did. Should we impose on everyone else his experience? No. Paul tells us that we should be transformed. The renewing of our mind, that's a process of changing expectations, changing the way we think, changing the way we approach others. The Lord said, I know the plans I have for you, plans for good and not evil. God has a plan. And so when we are frustrated, our purpose, and that's what this is about, that is one of the things I miss, and I'm not going to start doing it, even though it's in our book of order, but that's one of the things I miss about the old-fashioned altar. You may have never had that experience. But there have been moments when I was struggling with something and I came to the front and someone came and knelt by me and we prayed together and God did a work in my heart. God did a work in my life. I miss that. And I wish we would do that once in a while. Let church go, and if God touched your heart, gather at the front while everybody visits and have prayer together. That's what the Bible tells us to do. It tells us one another, bear one another's burdens. And Jesus said, bring our burdens to him. Bring our disappointments, even our anger, because anger weighs heavy. Frustration weighs heavy. Do you know that it takes more emotional energy to be angry at someone than it does to laugh? And so when we carry those angers and those frustrations and they did it again, we burden ourselves again. Jesus said, bring me your burdens. Take my yoke upon you. He didn't say it's going to be easy, but he said my burden is light. Stephen stood before the people and he was stoned. And for the joy of seeing a vision of Jesus Christ, he stood there and saw the Lord. That's how laying our burdens on Jesus and coming and taking his yoke upon us. I'm not saying it's easy. People will suffer. We will get sick. But we're not alone. And we can carry those burdens because Jesus is carrying them. We're yoked with him. Have you ever seen animals in a yoke? We've got two animals and they've got this wood across them and they're yoked together. And when one starts getting weary, the other one helps to pull whatever they're pulling behind, whether they're plowing or whatever. We find rest for our souls and in our relationships because we come to Jesus with our emotions, with our struggles, with our fears, with our shames, with the things that dog us. We come to Jesus and we lay them down and we say, okay, let's do it your way this time. We are in a transformational process. And Susan said to us the other day, what does transformation look like to you? And we started talking about bringing more people in, and she goes, that's not transformation. That's just continuing on the way you are with more people. What is transformation? What will be transformed to make your church different? We've already started the process. We're going to invite the community to come in and eat with us, and maybe have movies after dinner, and we can tell the parents, bring your kids, and after dinner, the pastor will take the kids in the other room and do something with them, and you can watch a movie together. Or bring in music, so people who can't afford to go to a concert can come and listen to some music. We're talking about diaper ministry for people who can't afford diapers for their children. Can you imagine not having diapers for your children? So we're starting to listen to what God is saying, and listen to the community and what the needs are around us, and saying, God, how can we be your people? Even if we're only 20 people, if we never grow, how can we be your witnesses? And trusting God that we will be yoked with him to carry forward the tasks that God lays on our hearts. Now, will he bring people in? I believe he will. But he might bring some in who don't sing the way you sing. And he might bring some in who don't dress the way you dress. And he might bring some people in who don't smell the way you would like them to smell. Are we willing to be transformed? Are we willing to be what God is calling us to be? To be the people who witness, to be the people who demonstrate the freedom that comes from knowing Christ, who demonstrate the strength that comes from being yoked with him. He said, my yoke is easy, my burden is light. It's not simple, it's not without frustration, but we have strength that comes from God. She said transformation should scare you. How will we do this? How will we get all this done? I mean, where will the money come from? How? It's like a roller coaster. Those of you who like roller coasters and those of you who don't, do you remember you're excited about the ride, but then you get on and it starts going up and you think, what did I do? What did I do? What did I do? Get me off here. Well, it's too late now. We're going uphill right now. We're going uphill in this transformation process, and we're looking for guidance from God. But you know, we're going to get to that top, and we're going to start down that hill, and the fear is going to start coming to us and saying, this isn't the way church is supposed to be. We never did it that way before. The 7 last words of the church. We never did it that way before. Those are the words that kill a congregation. Because our expectations are it should be the way it always was. Some of you as children, your expectations were that the women would come in with a hat and gloves. And when I was a little girl, I'd wear a hat and gloves and carry my little purse. Some of you have different expectations. It's time for us, if we want to be transformed, to do 2 things. First, to lay our expectations down, to lay down our presuppositions and our judgmentalism of others and of the way we think God should do things, and to pick up the Spirit of God to lead us and guide us. To lay down our expectations, and that was for us individually, what we should be. Let God tell us what we should be. To renew our minds and our thoughts, and then to lay down our expectations and say, God, what do you want us to be? I'd like to start a prayer meeting, and we can gather in the pews or down here and just spend time praying, God, what do you want us to be? Come and walk the labyrinth in the next few weeks when they're here, and just walk and listen to God as you walk through that circuitous route, and wait on God and let God speak. Because when we lay down our presuppositions, when we lay down our expectations, God gives us the best plan, and he shows us the way to go. Let us pray. Creative God, we can't see the future, but we like to plan it. We can't control anything, but we like to. Oh God, forgive us for the times when we constrain your will, when we constrain your spirit, when we contain your love and don't share it with others because they're not like us, or they don't do things the way we think they should do them. Forgive us for harboring anger or pain or shame when your will is to redeem us and free us and set us free from all of those things. Pour out your Spirit upon us today, Lord. Help us to our private places of prayer and speak to our hearts. Help us to lay down those things that we clench to so tightly that we might be able to find even greater fellowship with our brothers and sisters, that we might be able to see your will not only in our lives,